Okay, I think we can start now. Thank you everyone for coming, and huge thanks to my great panelists. I would like to ask for a huge applause for our panelists today. Pieter Cleppe, editor-in-chief of Brussels Report. Pieter is here to tell us about what politicians say in Brussels when the cameras are off. Tobiasz Adamczewski, vice president of Energy Forum, expert on climate and renewable energy, and Włodzimierz, chief energy expert at the Union of Entrepreneurs and Employers with experience both in sectors of green and conventional energy. Thank you for coming. We stand here in April of 2026, de facto on the crossroads for European climate regulations and reporting policies. And for years, the stance of Brussels was loud and clear: prioritize ecology, social responsibility, renewable resources, and resources independence. The geopolitical shocks of Ukrainian war, which we felt hugely in Poland, and what we feel all in the world, the Iran war, showed how dependent and how vulnerable Europe is on energy shocks. And the wake-up call came from Draghi report, which probably all of us heard of. And it forced a painful admission that without facing on competitiveness, without focusing on business first and energy transformation second, there's no energy transformation at all. And today we're seeing first attempts for changing the course or course correction, the Omnibus package. And the first question to Włodzimierz: the Omnibus package was intended to be a major downsizing of European bureaucracy, of overregulation, yet the entrepreneurs and the business sector argue that it changes too small of regulation, and it's too late. So what is your opinion as representative of business, and what are the biggest problems for entrepreneurs and for business regarding reporting?
Okay. So the upward revision of reporting thresholds represented sort of relief for entrepreneurs, especially in the small companies. While compliance departments can also enterprise certain relief, but what is the most important, it is for smaller companies and a smaller field. But for them, where those compliance departments are very small, one people or two individuals, it creates cost. So if we are looking for revision for them, it is always positive, and it will be consequently such a legislation easing has been welcomed by the business community and entrepreneurs, especially in the middle and the small companies. Furthermore, I believe that it is possible to curb the bureaucratic overreach of banks and large corporations regarding excessive reporting. It can be done. For entrepreneurs, what I think it is one of the most important issues, a primary challenge remains the lack of clarity regarding the underlying purpose of certain disclosure requirements. So, moreover, there is a significant concern regarding a potential necessity to disclose proprietary manufacturing process of trade secrets. And when we easy the way for them, I think they welcome it with pleasure, and it is sort of one of the most important things which can be legislated with the hopes sooner in our parliament and so on.
Thank you. Peter, from Brussels' perspective, is ESG a genuine tool for fixing the world and changing the future, the world for future generations for better, or rather a new tool for control mechanism to allow bureaucrats decide which company has a great ESG score, which does not, and de facto which company can get financing?
Well, ESG is a broad label, but it's definitely factually government control over the corporate sector. And actually, it's funny that today there's an ESG conference happening here in this building. So clearly, the days of ESG are not over yet, but things have changed quite a bit. And of course, the election of Donald Trump played a major role in that. We could see how sincere banks were about all this when they decided to end the so-called net zero alliance. But of course, a lot of the sort of regulatory framework, especially in Europe, is still very, very much in place. Regulations on sustainability have been watered down a little bit. The CSDDD, for example, is some kind of a directive that is imposing all kinds of obligations on companies to try to track how sustainable their suppliers are in their supply chain. Now, look, sometimes you can make a case for that. Slavery. Impose an obligation on companies not to work with slave labor. That strikes me as reasonable, but often these companies generally don't know it. And where does it stop? Forced labor, that's an obvious one, but then all kinds of ecological and social policy choices to try to impose that onto the supply chain of major companies, not just European companies, also American companies were expected to comply with all of this. That's created a backlash. And as I mentioned, in the context of the Omnibus package, the first one, this has already been watered down, which is a small step in the right direction. But ultimately, I think regulation is not optimal. The legal systems of EU member states, they all have, I think, sufficient provisions to deal with companies causing damage in one way or another. And this is basically the old way. If a company is causing damage, be it environmental damage, then the victims can go to court and ask for compensation. I believe this is a better approach than to overregulate companies, which comes with all kinds of side effects that big corporates ultimately kind of like this compliance burden because they can use it to keep out not only foreign competitors, if European corporates are, for example, already compliant, but also within the European market, they can use this legislation or profit from this legislation in the sense that it works as a disadvantage to small competitors.
Yeah, and it's referring to what Włodzimierz said, that for small companies, it's a huge burden because they have 1, 2 employees, and some of them must do compliance. So yes, Tobiasz, please tell us about where is today the line between green transformation, which leads to energetic independence, which, of course, I think we all can agree that it's important, and where it ends, and where is maintaining competition of European economy where is this line where we get from one side to another? And the second question, so maybe answer for this, and I'll ask the second later.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for the invitation. It's, competition or competitiveness and environmentalism or protecting the environment or climate policy, they can go hand in hand. And this is the theory. And your point that we're also looking at energy independence as a part of it is huge. I mean, we are, as Poland and as the EU, we are very much dependent on importing oil, gas, and coal. In Poland, we also import coal, even though we have our own mines. Now, where the problem lies is where you don't align politics with policies. So if you have a policy and you have a strategy that is for the common market of the European Union, and it says, hey, we want to get carbon neutral by 2050, and this, one of the reasons is because of climate change, but the other reason is because we want to have our own energy, we want to be energy independent. And then you have certain countries where they say, you know what, the European Union or the Commission is forcing things on us because the policies are not popular. Then you have a huge problem, because if you were aligned with the policies, which, by the way, were asked to be implemented by member states and by the European Parliament, the European Commission acts on the mandate of European politicians who are chosen by the people. So this is one of the points I wanted to make, because it seems like the discussion is always about the Commission doing things to member states, and this is ridiculous. This is not how European policy works. So the example of Poland is very good here, because we have been in the European Union when the ETS system, for example, has been put in place. It was well known that climate policy is going to be important because we were in the Kyoto Protocol, we were in the UNFCCC process, and we sort of clung on to these policies because the European Union was giving us additional funds for transformation, and because it seemed like something we have to do as part of the package, which is true. But on the other hand, we had governments who stopped transformation for many reasons. And the main reasons were because you had people in big state companies who had vested interest for things not to change. And this is still one of the things that happens. So you need regulation and you need laws that are bigger than one single government, which the European Union gives you, which are not popular, so that you can actually implement laws that are good for you, but it's really difficult to explain why. And I just wanted to say one thing before I pass the microphone. If we weren't forced to do climate policy through the ETS, through renewable energy and things like that, we would have been paying way more for coal subsidies now. Currently, 1 ton of coal costs about 1,000 zloty to take out of the ground. It costs the energy company 500 zloty to buy it, because if they didn't buy it from the coal company, then they would just import it. And for that reason, we are paying through our pockets the 500 so that the coal companies can exist. And this adds up to, last year, I think it was around 9 billion zlotys. So our energy mix changed quite a bit over the couple of years. We are now using about 30% of renewables. We are using a little bit more gas, and half of our energy comes from coal. If we hadn't had this change happen, we would have been stuck paying 500 extra zloty out of pocket for 100% of our electricity, or 95% as it was before. And the reason this happened is because there were countries in the EU who went through that process of transformation before, and they knew this is exactly what's going to happen. In Poland, we had politicians who were going, and they still repeat the message that we're going to have coal for 200 years, and this is just going to be draining our pockets. So that's one point I wanted to make.
So it's more like that medicine we have to take now, to an investment we have to make now, that in future will pay later. So it's like an engine of transformation.
It's an engine of transformation. It's a misunderstood engine of transformation, and it's a misaligned engine of transformation in terms of what politicians are talking about. It's something that is hated upon by most politicians, not because it's a bad mechanism per se, but it's a badly implemented mechanism in Poland. One of the reasons is because the money from the ETS that was supposed to go for transformation was used for many other things, but not for transformation.
Peter, could you tell us the perspective of different countries? How was it implemented? Because Tobiasz mentioned how it was badly implemented in Poland. Can you share with us more European experience? How was it? And because it's really critically taken in different countries, in different political groups, and they're saying that it's just a generator of costs, the ETS system. So what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, so the ETS, the emission trading system of the EU, is indeed, I think, the main obstacle to cheaper energy at the moment. European governments have been embarking on massive experiments with energy supply. And it's not a good idea to experiment with energy supply. You pay a very high cost for that, simply because you cannot just overnight change your mistake. But there's one thing European governments can do, and that is to immediately suspend the ETS. The ETS is, as you know, I think, the emission trading system. So it's de facto a climate tax on industry. And just to give you an idea how damaging it is to the competitiveness of our industry in Europe. So if you look at the natural gas price in Europe, this is 4 or 5 times the level of the natural gas price in the United States. Because in the US, thanks to fracking, they have been able to drive down the gas price. Now, the costs of ETS in the gas price, it's twice the total level of the American gas price. So if European governments would decide to suspend this system, which is something requested now by Italy and Slovakia, and believe by Poland as well, I'm not entirely sure, this would mean immediate alleviation, mostly for our chemical industry. Our chemical industry is the basis for all other industries, and it's incredible how long it took for them to raise the alarm. There was only Sir Jim Ratcliffe in the UK, the founder of INEOS, I guess because he's the owner, he's not some manager, who has been complaining about the carbon taxation also in the UK, which is still aligning and is actually planning to align more with ETS, believe it or not, with the EU energy policies. But the CEO of BASF in March finally also came out and started criticizing the ETS. Now there has been a European summit. There was really consensus, a number of countries, including Spain, but I believe also Portugal and the Nordic countries, they support the current ETS approach. So the Commission has now made a proposal, the European Commission, to sort of, slightly manipulate the price of ETS down, which effectively means slightly lower carbon taxation. Now, of course, the question is, if you suspend this whole thing, what about climate change? What about CO2 emission? Well, you can't prove it one for one, but it's a fact that if you look at the per capita emission in the United States and you compare it with the per capita emission in Europe, the EU, over the last 20 years, ETS was started in 2005, that the US has booked slightly more success. This is partially due to the shale revolution The US was able to replace dirty coal with shale gas. Environmentalists are against shale and against fracking. It's banned in the whole of Europe, but after Putin cut the gas for Europe, European governments happily import American shale. So it's beyond hypocritical. It's just embarrassing almost. There is likely great potential for shale in Europe, like there is also great potential for other domestic fossil fuel exploration. So from an environmental point of view, you could say, yes, central planning and taxation like ETS may be one approach, but clearly there is another approach, the approach of innovation, of allowing new technology that is more environmentally friendly, which has been adopted more or less by the US. They have a bit of cap and trade, I think, in California, but yeah, that's about it. I think this is what this is the choice that Europe now needs to make, because our chemical industry is in very bad straits. And some experts say that even if they would abolish ETS now, that the damage will not immediately stop. These are long-term investment decisions that are being taken at the moment. And for a very important industry, the sort of the mother of all industries. And I think it's questionable that this is not higher on the political agenda at the moment.
Chcesz mówić?
Okay. Yeah, a few things. Maybe first of all, the ETS does not place a price on gas. Period. We have expensive gas because we are importing it. LNG is expensive, and that's the reason why gas in Europe is expensive. We have a squeeze. The ETS does not put a price on gas. The ETS does put a price on emissions once you burn the gas in an industrial plant. But if your industrial plant is a plant that is protected because it could move somewhere else outside of the EU, then it gets its allowances for free, or at least most of them, depending on the benchmark. Thus far, industry has not been subject to paying ETS or a lot of money for the ETS because of this protectionism. The reason why industry right now is talking about the ETS as being a problem is because the CBAM is coming in, and the free allowances that have been given for free will be taken away year after year quite more. And this is the reason the discussion right now about the ETS has been raised by industry. The other thing about industry is that it has also been protected, the industry that would have been running away from Europe, from high electricity prices because of ETS. In Poland, this has been implemented in 2019. Last year, 3 billion zloty have been given away to industry to protect it. So the amount of the cost of energy that rose because of ETS for those companies has been paid out in subsidies, so that the electricity in the final count can be lower. And I think that's important. Now things are changing. This is why industry is coming up. And instead of saying, hey, let's suspend the whole system, from a point of view of a think tank, and we like to go into the details, we don't say deregulate, because I think deregulate is a magical word that doesn't mean anything, because if you want to deregulate something, that means you have to create another regulation. It's about changing policy so that they work for the reason you want them to work. Now, in terms of costs for people who are paying for electricity in Poland, even though we use 50% of coal for production of our electricity, the ETS is about 10% of the bill you pay. Now, we pay about 200 zloty per family in a month, so it's about 20 zloty. 20 zloty is about 5 euros. Is this too expensive? I mean, I don't think it's too expensive for people, but it is a problem when you don't understand that the money, this 5 zloty that you pay, is going back into your country's budget, and that it should be used for good things. And this was the problem in the ETS, because the way it was constructed is that it gave governments the option to take this money and redistribute it basically however they saw fit, and without showing people how the money is redistributed, how it works, and the money should be going to refurbishment of houses, of photovoltaic panels, and things like that to make energy cheaper in the end. We haven't had this message across, so this is one of the reasons that the ETS right now is one of the black sheep that is in the EU that is being fought.
Briefly, no, I can send you this statistic showing that effectively Amsterdam TTF gas price is being compared with the one in the States, and the share of the ETS. But
the ETS does not go into the
well, I can show you this. I mean, I'll look it up and I'll show you. But on top of it, I think it's questionable that in Europe we say, we're pricing ourselves out of the markets, so we need a tariff, the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, because the rest of the world refuses to copy our energy policies. As a result, this complicates the trading relationship with our trading partners, like with India. So sort of failed policies lead to protectionism. Then our own industry is complaining about the bureaucracy. They get exempted also, so you have all kinds of unfair treatment, more bureaucracy. Then all these receipts are then supposed to be used, as you say, for promoting better technology. Surprise, surprise, a lot of that money is used for other things. I mean, this is central planning running wild. Ideally, the government should not be in the business of picking winners and saying, this is a good technology, this is a bad technology. I mean, I wish renewable energy is absolutely the best. I think there's a lot of good arguments for it. But what is also true is that, and you see that where I'm from in Belgium and the Netherlands, that many companies fail to get connection to the grid, because the grid is not made for renewables. It is made for basically nuclear power. And then I'm talking about electricity, because a system whereby you have the electricity coming from the nuclear plant to the consumer, and not back and forth all the time. And of course, in any way, I'm sure the grid had to be upgraded. But the real cost of renewables should also take into account the adaptation costs of the grid for renewables. And maybe then renewables may still be a good idea, or it may not be a good idea. And then of course you have all the environmental challenges with renewables, the processing of waste, of solar panels, of windmills. We're putting the North Sea full of windmills. Or landscapes. I mean, from an environmental perspective, it raises some questions. But anyway, at the core of it, it's not that this is bad technology or good. It's that it's all centrally planned. Obviously, this is not very successful now. If you look at the energy prices in Europe, that is basically causing huge damage to our competitiveness.
Okay, I think we detailed too much our discussion, and I would like to show you, I'm more from I have practical point of view, because I built something like 500 megawatts in Poland of onshore wind energy, as well as I worked in conventional energy for a while. So if we want to show how it should like in Europe, we shouldn't focus our attention only on Poland, because our Polish context is quite different than the whole European context. And because we, at the moment, after the war has started, we are on the front line, and it changed much. It changed a lot in our policy. So maybe we could discuss how it should like in whole Europe, and against this backdrop we should analyze our Polish transition transition field, because this field for us is quite different than whole Europe. Okay, so I don't want to miss you too much,
Yes,
mess you.
Peter mentioned about competitiveness and business, and and Tobiasz said about subsidiaries for Polish consumers. We know that electricity prices have been frozen for consumers. It wasn't that good for business. And I would like to ask more about the effect of high energy on our competitiveness and the business generally of European business, and what specific actions, both nationally, Poland, but if you don't want to speak, we can speak on a European level. How can new regulations lower energy prices and increase business competitiveness?
Well, I don't know what you mean, competitiveness in energy sector, because it is very difficult to...
I mean, because of high energy prices, we have to sell goods or everything we produce at a higher price because we have higher costs. So in that context,
I don't think we have highest cost of energy production in Poland. That is not true. Our production, it's not so high as in other countries. And, let's say like this, that at the European level, the mechanism to foster single market, because we don't have single market, we don't have unified market in Europe. We just create it. And this market can be implemented somewhere, but not now, and especially not before the war in the Ukraine will be finished, will be ended. So at the moment, we are trying to harmonize the settlement frameworks in Europe. We are trying to integrate transmission lines. We are trying to frequency. It's going on actually, but it's not ready yet. And for a long time, it will not be ready. What else? When you look at the countries, each member of European, each country runs its own politics, energy politics. Look at France. France anchored energy policy on the nuclear energy. Now they develop step by step, of course, renewable. But Germany closed this nuclear fleet and decommissioned it. So it shows the fundamentally contrasting system, France and Germany. And if you look at the northern Sweden and Nordic countries, it looks quite differently than and here in Poland, we have the problem that we will not be able to implement the ETS or some other fully how European Union await from us. So now I do hope that our government should start the real stark negotiation with European Committee to relax some obligation for us, because our domestic context of our energy differs so much from what European Union required that we will not be able to make it. And remember, for the first, there is no way to diverse climate policy. I'm absolutely certain of it. Because it is not only a climate matter. It's technology, what you said, it is new technology, electrification of transport, and so on and so on. But here in Poland, we have great problem because we lost a lot of time And still we have over 50% of energy comes from coal. And we will not liquidate it in 10 or 15 years. No way, believe me. We can make a bet. I can make a bet for what you want, that it is not possible from practical point of view. There is certain programs how to work, but in my opinion, it is not possible. You know, I'm a fan of renewable. I build a lot. But now I see what going to be do or what is absolutely impossible. That's for the time from me.
So maybe I think that's a little bit what Tobiasz mentioned. Maybe without high prices of ETS allowances, we wouldn't be able to phase out coal at all. Maybe that's the brutal price pressure is the only language that free market understands. What do you think?
I will clearly what is one? Our nuclear program will not work before 2040. Believe me. So what can we do with our oil, with our coal? What will be our main sources? What? Having 50% today. How you want to do it? No way.
Maybe you can add a little bit to this. So one of the mechanisms that is working in Poland, an economic mechanism, regulated mechanism, is something called the capacity market. The capacity market is a way for the government to launch tenders to buy technology that will give the needed capacity so that the energy so that the power is there for whatever we use. And this is done first of all by the calculations of the transmission system operator in Poland, PSE, and then it goes into market through the regulatory office. And what happened over the past 5 years, and we've done an extensive report about this. It's online. You can look at it. Right now, we have about 5 gigawatts of gas in the system. The capacity market is going to add an extra 8 gigawatts of gas into the system. We have 5 gigawatts of offshore wind that is already contracted and is being built. And we have 5 gigawatts of energy storage, which is contracted through the capacity mechanism, but because there's a factor that was put in, there's actually 10 gigawatts that is being planned to be built through the mechanism. There's also much more photovoltaic that has grid connection permits, and if we have a better permitting law, then we will also have much more onshore wind because they already too have grid permits. And this goes in contrast to what you said in terms of the grids not being ready. They are ready. When you look at the grid permitting that has been already given out by the TSO and the DSOs, we can see that the energy transformation can happen. So simultaneously, there are things that are being done. One, the grids are being expanded. And yes, this costs, and it's true. And this cost should be taken into account into modeling. But at the same time, we have formal contracts for new capacity to be built. And so what's happening is the coal is being squeezed out of the system because of economics. And the economics are not pure economics. And they never have been pure economics because the Polish energy system has been built during communism when there was no free market. And then if you wanted, in the free market for new capacity to come in, you have no way to compete. Absolutely no way to compete because you're competing against state-owned companies that had assets that were built during communism. So you had to have some type of regulation and some type of subsidies that allow people like Włodzimierz here to come in with their wind projects and to be able to actually implement them economically. What I'm saying is that through the capacity market, through what we're seeing in the permits and through what we're seeing in modeling, by 2035, even though there might be some coal capacity left in the system for security measures or whatever, they're probably not going to be working more than a few hours a year. And this is going to happen before nuclear is going to come in, and we will most probably see a system that is mostly decarbonized. The issue that we have right now is whether we will be using the gas capacity at full speed, and we're going to be importing all this gas that is going to be super expensive from whatever region that is not at war at the moment, or whether we're going to be using as much renewables as we possibly can and then supplement whatever energy we need through the gas capacity that is going to be added. So this is something that's already happening on paper. Poland has already done its energy transformation. Right now, we're also looking at the heating sector because this is a big issue.
So maybe odwrócenie. Well, if you take the offshore wind energy, we had auction 500 zloty almost per megawatt. Yeah, but no matter 400 or 500, anyway, it is 1/3 of the price of the market price. So if the selling price of the energy will be 500 zloty, it means that for the customer, for the entrepreneur, it will cost over 1,000 zloty. No way. Or the country will subsidize it. Or another. The only way now for us, it is onshore wind energy. The only way. And another, it is, I wrote the program together with a couple of friends of revitalization of coal small blocks, what costs just the minimum, to stabilize the work of wind energy and of course photovoltaic. And today, fortunately, it comes back because it's much, much cheaper than gas. Gas is okay. It's very easy to operate with the gas and wind energy, but it can be expensive. But the small blocks can work with wind energy, and it's the way. If we have in the future, if we install nuclear energy, of course, amortization for 70 years, maybe it brings something, but if you put the 50 years, it is absurd with any profits, never. So we have so we must start to combine this expensive energy with cheap energy. This is the only way. So onshore wind, revitalization old coal blocks, plus gas. Because nuclear energy, it is the future. It is future over 2040. What will happen then? Who knows?
Okay. Coming out from Poland, maybe we'll talk more about regulatory things. Before enabling institutional investors to trade ETS allowances, the prices were really low, and in 3 years after allowing institutional investors on ETS trading certificates, the prices have risen 1,500%. And would excluding institutional investors from ETS trading certificates system to eliminate speculation would be a possible solution, Peter? And is such a move even possible politically and economically?
Well, you have this ETS market, as you say. So I'm not sure how excluding a number of potential traders from a market is going to fix much. I mean, if you exclude a certain segment of traders from the real estate market, I mean, what's the effect going to be on the price? Maybe there's going to be an effect. I think it's completely unrelated to the heart of the matter. That this is a market, and I see the logic that you try to
To cut off the speculation. That's what some
sure.
some people say.
Well, look, I'm sure there's speculation. I don't deny that, but of course, as in any market, if you speculate, things may go wrong. The reason why the prices are up or down, which we've seen, is because businesses were exempt, and now they will become less and less exempt. That is what driving. That's what driving the price. And yeah, as I've maintained, I think this is a major issue, and it's good that this is politically recognized. Maybe slightly going into what we were discussing a bit before. Onshore wind at the moment in Germany, Benelux, is getting very hard to convince people to have the windmills next to their house. And people ask, well, I mean, if somebody is allowed to build some windmill on the top of the hill, why is there then a ban on building an apartment block on the top of that hill, right? So that's why politicians have moved to offshore windmills in the North Sea. But it's not been a good last 2 years for that either. Lots of failed auctions. Belgium is building an energy island that the politicians are now frantically trying to scale down because it's all becoming very expensive. I mean, the grid investments are massive in the Netherlands, in Belgium. But look, maybe a lot of these investments would have been necessary anyway, of course. There's a lot of analysts who claim that the Spanish blackout was partially due to the weak grid, apart from the fact that they're not well connected to France. So all of this is, I think wherever you stand, you have to admit this is all very experimental. Well, yeah, no, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's responsible to experiment with energy supply. It's extremely important for, well, it's good to experiment with innovation, but it's not good for policies to experiment. A policy must be reliable. There should not be politicians picking winners and losers. And I take your point that in the specific context of Poland, I believe that you're absolutely right that newcomers are competing unfairly. But for me, the solution to that is not to then draw the newcomers into the corrupt state system, but to try to privatize as much as possible, from the legacy system, and maybe split it up. In railways, we've seen how this worked very well. In Japan, it's a successful. That's a different debate. But I'm just saying there's ways of doing privatization right. There's clearly ways of doing it wrong as well if it happens in a crony way. But I think that has to be the approach. And ultimately, business ventures will be more dynamic anyway if they're not eating out of the hand of the state. We have some pretty successful renewable energy companies in Belgium, and that on principle refuse any subsidies because of that reason. So I think, the right approach is let 1,000 flowers bloom, but of course the reality is in energy that everywhere in the world the politicians always have their hand on this because it's so crucial, because you need licenses. This Belgian professor Samuel Fourfary is a former senior commission official on energy. So he says a bit as a joke, the governments, they will more quickly privatize the army than that they will privatize energy, because it's so absolutely crucial. But that does not take away from the truth, I think, that in many cases when you have the private sector playing a role as much as is politically possible, that you see great outcomes. And I think we need fair competition. We should also not promote nuclear, right? I think nuclear needs to compete equally.
No way.
Excuse me?
No way to compete nuclear with other sources. Nuclear, it is matter of state energy, not private. Even the United States, if you look deep, how it looks like. And if you look to the couple of years ago, it was the problem in Texas. A friend of mine who lives there, he told me that they had blackout for 2 weeks because they've done experiment with privatization of the energy. You know what happens? If it's not profitable, we don't produce. Turn off the key. And the only army came and supply with the energy, part of Dallas or somewhere like this. No way, there will be no privatization of energy, never. Only sort of energy down there, like windmills, like photovoltaic, but it can reflect on prices everywhere. If our local energy would be cheap, it would compete with the prices of the national energy. There will be influence on it, but not so much. No, you know, the state take the responsibility for supply and must have oversight or control to this. We cannot privatize the whole sector. It is absolutely impossible. That's my opinion.
Sure, but of course, in large parts of the energy sector are of course also private, right? But specifically when it comes to nuclear, I do think you can make a case that the regulation has been increasing a lot, and you see that specifically in the UK with the new nuclear plant that they're building there. There have been stories of requirements to build fish discos and all kinds of, let's say, relatively unreasonable requirements, as much as obviously we want safety. But yeah, the good example is in Japan. They had this tragic disaster in Fukushima, and I remember right after there's a very well-known British environmental activist, George Monbiot, and he wrote an article in The Guardian, not a neoliberal newspaper, and he basically said, I changed my mind about nuclear power. He said, I used to be against, and now after Fukushima, due to the experience, I'm in favor, because this was the ultimate stress test. He said it was a tsunami, an earthquake, and a meltdown. And of course, there was a lot of people, dead from the natural disaster, but directly from the meltdown. I mean, if you go to the Wikipedia page and you click through to the original sources of the Fukushima disaster, you can see that it's a very low number of people that they could prove was tragic, of course. But this is one of the reasons why Japan is now returning full force to this, but obviously with a large role for the government. But I think given the success that the private sector can play in many fields, I do think we need to, within the political reality, try to maximize the role for the private sector.
Maximize, that's okay.
Yeah. I would like to follow up to what you said. Where is the balance between the safety of all of us, of consumers, and where the free market should end to get all people safe and get them energy? So if you could, Peter, say, Tobiasz, or I can Jens go first.
Okay, so if you take the local energy on the local ground, there is the place for private energy and for to compete with the prices and supply and transmission. I don't see problem with transmission in Poland anymore. You will see. No problem with grid connection will be in the next 5-6 years. Everything will be, but it's not this problem. The problem for Poland is, for us, is that now, don't forget about military progress in our production of tanks and other things. For this sector, they need energy, and economy will not come to them, no matter the prices. They need electricity. So in Poland, we're going to have two kind of markets. On the local, it can be normal market system and state system for our industry, military industry, chemical industry, and the other industry. And how to combine it, how to work together, I don't know, very difficult.
I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we have an electricity market, and you can buy energy based on contracts, and you can see how expensive the contracts are. You can buy long-term contracts. You can buy electricity from the spot market. I don't see there being two markets. There can be subsidies given to the military to buy electricity cheaper, or to have their own photovoltaics or storage units or whatever, and that's going to require, of course, subsidies because the military doesn't make its own money. But I don't think it's not going to be two markets. The one thing that the state should do is to and this is one of the things, about when we talk about deregulation. This is one of the reasons why I don't believe that the word means anything, because for the prosumers, for people to be able to actually have photovoltaics on their houses, you couldn't just remove a law. You had to build a law. So that how when the DSO is going to attach your system, to give them 30 days to know what you're going to get in return if you put energy into the system. And this was one of the better things that happened in Poland. So yeah. Peter, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, I think to your question on safety, I think, of course, safety should be maximum. And if that means, stricter regulation, then I think you can make that case. Of course, ideally, as I mentioned, you have to keep the preventive regulation to the problems that that will happen, right? I don't think you should try to solve problems that are unknown. But if you look at, again, nuclear installations, more or less the same ones, and you see in some countries they are built much faster than in others, then this proves that in some, assuming that everywhere policymakers want maximum safety for the population, because obviously we don't want any accidents with that, then clearly there's a debate to be had on whether perhaps nuclear, safety regulations has not gone too far, especially also then if you look at how the kind of people that are sometimes in there tend to be anti-nuclear activists in some countries. There's some examples of that. So I think that's a valid debate to be had, and that will also happen with this new SMR, so sort of small nuclear power stations, which maybe will, be something more for the private sector than these massive installations. But indeed, we'll have to see if that's politically viable. But I would wish it at least.
Everyone wants to have a nuclear power plant in a country, but nobody wants to have it near their home. So that's every single energy type.
I wouldn't mind. In the Netherlands, in the south of the Netherlands, you almost don't see it because it doesn't have a cooling
I
tower.
experience some problems with this.
We're slowly heading to the end of our discussion panel. Peter, last question before we will enter the summary round. What is the dominant narrative in Brussels today? How have politicians finally realized that without strong economic business cobblestone and without competitive business sector, deep energy transformation will be very hard to achieve and simply almost impossible to finance itself? So what is the narrative in Brussels right now?
I think you see conflicting dynamics. On the one hand, you have this sort of ETS dynamic of industry complaining about it, a number of member states asking for suspension, which is then being resisted. On the other hand, you have sort of the other arm of the bureaucracy that is still continuing a business as usual. The EU just agreed another climate target, this time by 2040. Forgive me, I've forgotten the exact details. They have all kinds of targets by 2035, 2050. and they felt it necessary to agree yet another one that then had to be watered down because of protest. We talk about ETS, but that's for industry. But then, of course, there's the ETS 2 that is supposed to enter into force, if I'm not mistaken, in 2027. What is ETS 2? It's effectively another tax, but this time for consumers, specifically for people that tend to heat their house with gas, or people that drive a petrol or a diesel car. According to some estimates, this would cost maybe €600 per family per year. Of course, I'm sure that all of these estimates are probably up for challenge, but there's a consensus that this is, yet another costly measure that may well have to be postponed or suspended indefinitely again. So conflicting dynamics, and the European Commission bureaucracy that is trying to save as much as it can from the Green Deal and all the policies it has implemented.
So before we will summarize the panel, are there any questions from the audience?
Well, I think one of the issues in the energy sector is that the government doesn't have enough skin in the game, to quote a famous author. Maybe we could work around on that if we have to assume that there is government meddling with energy necessary. Then I think we should have a mechanism, something like, if there is a blackout, the government has to retreat and has to pay back like 50% of the salary they earned in the legislature, and all of the administrators of the energy grid of the public sector in the energy grid have to retreat as well. I think if we do that, we will see a switch to much more, well, responsible energy policy. And this is what I'd like to see. What do you think?
Maybe a quick response. And one thing I wanted to say also, it's not a few countries against the European Commission. It's a few countries that are arguing with another few countries, and then the European Commission is in the middle of that to create policies. The European Commission, of course, has its own point of view because of people who have been working there for a while. But then again, if the countries agree that they want to change, then the Commission can't do anything about that. They have to change it. So it's just a matter of policy. In terms of your idea, I mean, sure, we should hold politicians accountable for everything that we have, not just energy policy. The thing about blackouts is most of them happen because of freak accidents. The Spain blackout did not happen because we have a lot of renewables. It happened because there was a miscommunication and misalignment between energy companies, plus some very technical elements of stabilizing the frequency. And yes, a lot of renewables are there, but there are technical mechanisms that can prevent this. Did the government do a bad thing in not having prevented this? Yes. Should they be held accountable? Yes. But it's not the fault of renewables. It's the fault of how the mechanism was managed. By the way, Spain right now has the cheapest energy in all of the European Union by far, and they're experiencing the biggest economic boom they have in a while. And this is one of the reasons why. So this is just coming back to the beginning of our conversation. If you have an overarching policy that is going to last for a few governments, regardless of who's going to come in, but it's being implemented with the thought of it being, when I worked at the Ministry of Environment, oh my goodness, it was, I think, 15 years ago when I did climate policy negotiations for Poland. I remember Spain being the champions of renewable energy, and Poland was like, you guys are crazy, but then it pays off after a while, but you have to keep on doing it. You have to keep on doing it.
Any other questions?
Okay, so that's a good sign because you said everything that could be said. No, I'm joking.
no.
It's a really broad topic, but I would like to ask you for a brief summary of today's panel and additional question to all of you. If you got a magic wand and one policy that could be changed right now, uh, related to energy prices, energy sector, green transformation, name it, what should we do? One policy and quick summary of a panel. Thank you. We can start from Pieter.
Well, as I mentioned, I would suspend the ETS. I think that's absolutely key. When it comes to renewables, yeah, sure. Let's especially Spain. They have a lot of sun. I do think that they should then also adapt the grid because the latest report I saw from Spain, I mean, it's all true, I think, what you're saying, but on top of it, they also had some grid challenges, apparently, according to that report. So you should not just, roll out a whole different kind of energy generation without also preparing all the whole context for it. And yeah, let a thousand flowers bloom. In Sweden they have lots of hydro because of the fact that they can have that. I think in Switzerland and Austria as well. Obviously, in certain countries that's not possible. But yeah, I think that's sort of for me, the most important lesson of the situation of energy in Europe today is that it's a bad idea to, come up with centrally planned solutions for energy that are heavily politicized with subsidies, all kinds of distortions, picking winners, especially when there was a relatively stable energy system before. And I believe that we're very much paying the price, literally, for that today. And I also believe that it will change, and perhaps with a role for renewables. But I think the jury is still out on that, and consumers will ultimately decide.
Yeah, I mean, the Spain example is a good way that this is what society wanted, what they did, and then what the outcome was. So it's one of Lithuania, I think, is also a very good example. Lithuania is one of the countries closest to Poland. They're very close to being done their energy transformation, mostly by onshore wind energy, and also have one of the cheapest electricity prices in the European Union. So the one legislation that I would want to change or get rid of, not to say deregulate, but get rid of, is a very bad wind permitting law, which came in about 10 years ago, and it basically stopped permitting of new onshore wind energy in Poland. And this cost billions of zloty for the society, not just because a value change stopped and people lost their jobs, but because if we were to develop wind energy with the tempo that it was going, then we would have saved billions of zlotys also on electricity prices and on CO2 emissions.
Well, I can recommend for our transition the pragmatic energy policy. What does it mean? It's a dual approach to energy. Extensive expansion for renewables energy and pragmatic reliance to Polish coal, which can be baseload for our security, energy security, and to balance it. I don't mention nuclear energy at the moment because it's so far. So at the moment, I think the pragmatic and listen to practice, not theory. We have too much of theory in Poland and not enough practical meaning and practical approach to energy system. That's all.
And I think that have been a great summary of today's panel. Thank you very much. Pieter, Cleppe, Tobiasz, Adamczewski, Włodzimierz, and thank you very much.
Sit, boss.